Hey guys, another video here for chapter 2. We're moving on to section 2 in our book. And the essential question for this video is, how can you use addition or subtraction to solve an inequality? So we're going to start working on solving inequalities. Our previous videos have been kind of introducing what an inequality is and how to graph it, how to translate it from like English to a math sentence. But now we actually want to solve. So we're going to jump right into it. We're going to start with a problem first because the easiest way to show you this is probably just to do it. So here's how we're going to start. We're going to solve and graph the solution for this problem. X minus 5 is less than negative 3. So please make your notes look super nice and neat, kind of matching how I'm doing mine, and we will work through this together. So here's the strategy on this one. We're going to begin with putting a line down the middle. Line down the middle is kind of what we did with chapter 1 when we were doing equal sign equations. This is the same thing. Instead of equals, we're using less than. Nothing big has changed here. And then we're going to use the same strategies, which is to isolate x. We want the variable all by itself. So that minus 5 has got to go. And the easiest way to do that is to add it to the other side. So we're going to equally add 5 to both sides. Now, if we wanted to get pretty fancy about this, we could actually name what we're doing here in our process. This is called the addition property of inequality. Now, to be honest, like if I wasn't teaching math every day and practicing this, I probably would not remember that this was the addition property of inequality. But it's nice to kind of hear those words because I want you to get familiar with them. All it means is we are adding to both sides equally, but it's an inequality symbol. And it's just a rule that you can add to both sides. Property in math, property means it's a rule. So here's our rule. We can add to both sides. So anyways, it's our addition property of inequality. We have added 5 to both sides. What happens is the minus 5 and the plus 5 cancel out. They're gone. X is now isolated all by itself. Oh yeah. And I had a little note off to the left here about the reason it's the addition property of inequality is because of the inequality symbol. In the last chapter, we had called it the addition property of equality because we had an equal sign, but this is inequality. So just a fine line difference in wording there, but an important one for you to kind of note. Now let's finish this out. X is by itself. We know negative 3 plus 5 is 2, so we now have a solution. X is less than 2. There's our answer. We figured it out. Yeah, so there it is. Now the next step is to take it and graph it. So now that we know x is less than 2, we're going to set up our number line like we did in the previous videos. And we're going to make a nice neat number line on our graph paper. Use your ruler. We're going to put 0 in the middle. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then all the negatives. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. And I use my graph paper lines to make that scale. I make my, when I'm actually doing it pencil and paper, I try to make it really neat. The important number we're focusing on is 2 because x is less than 2. So I'm going to circle 2. I'm going to test points on the left and the right, see which one passes, which one fails. I think what we'll do is we will test 5 and negative 3. 5's on the right, negative 3's on the left. I kind of picked them at random. I could have picked any points on either side. I just kind of went for something. And when you test them, we got to think about, is 5 less than 2? And is negative 3 less than 2? I know 5 is not less than 2, but negative 3 is. So negative 3 passes, but the 5 did not. So I'm going to be shading off to the left. So I'm going to use my pencil or my colored pencil or a highlighter to shade that number line. I'm going to put a big arrow on the end because it's going to keep going on forever and ever and ever. And then the only thing remaining is testing the point that's circled itself. So I got to test 2. Is 2 less than 2? No, 2 is not less than 2. 2 is equal to 2. So we're going to leave that nice empty hole. We're not going to shade it in. And we've got our solution. And we're done. So we've solved it, and we've graphed it, and we've finished up this problem. And to be honest, in class, like if we were taking a test or something or doing a quiz on this is kind of your level 4 work. If you can solve and graph, you can kind of approach this problem 2 different ways. So graphing and solving kind of complement each other and they go well together, and that's kind of an advanced way of showing you understand the problem. That's your level 4 work right there. Okay, so your turn. You try. Let's see if you got the hang of this with that one example. So I'm going to give you 3 problems, an A, B, C. You're going to solve them, and you're going to graph them. And if you're getting the hang of this, then that's great because you're catching on fast. So here's your first one. Y minus 6 is greater than negative 7. Y minus 6 is greater than negative 7. Pause the video. It's a good stopping point. Solve it, put your line down the middle and graph it, and then check in when you're ready. Okay, so you're unpausing the video now, and you're ready to check your answer, I hope. I hope you have a number line drawn and everything. So you should have a line down the middle, and you should have solved and got y is greater than negative 1. That means you have an empty hole at negative 1, and you've shaded off to the right. Now, if that's not what you have, maybe pause the video and go back through your work and see where did you make that mistake? Where did that happen? Try to track that down. Let's do the next one. Here's B. I'm going to give you some decimals to make it a little different. So B minus 3.8 is less than or equal to 1.7. Again, same story. Pause the video, try it yourself, graph it, and then check in with me. Okay, let's check your answer. So you put your line down the middle, you solved, you should have got B is less than or equal to 5.5, 5.5, which means on your number line you have a solid hole at 5.5 and you've shaded to the left of your number line. You have it nice and dark and shaded with a big arrow, and that's your solution. Okay, one more, letter C. Now I'm going to give you fractions. I'm making these, notice I went from easy to medium to hard. So the last one here is negative 1/2 is greater than z minus 1/4. Try that one on your own and see if you can get it. Okay, let's check your answer. I hope you tried it. So, first off, this is what you should have got, negative 1/4. And it should be an empty hole and shaded to the left. Now, I know some students prefer to switch their fractions to decimals. I know a lot of students will take 1/2 and they'll change it to negative 0.5. And they'll take 1/4 and they'll change it to 0.25 and they'll just go from there. That's totally fine if you want to do it that way. If not, you got to use common denominators when you add the 1/4 over. So you choose, make it a decimal if it's more convenient, if you like that way better, or don't forget your common denominators if that's the case, if you want to keep it as a fraction. Okay, move on. Let's go on to something else. Example 2. So same story. We're going to solve and graph, but we're going to look at a new problem here. Here's our problem. 13 is less than or equal to x plus 14. We're going to solve for x by isolating it. So we're going to get x all by itself. This time we got to get rid of the 14. So this time it looks like we need to take the 14 away. Now if we want to get fancy with our properties, we're subtracting from both sides. So this is the subtraction property of inequality instead of the addition. We're subtracting equally from both sides. We're going to take that 14 away, and it's going to wipe out, and x is going to be all by itself. And we're going to have negative 1. 13 take away 14 is negative 1. So here's our solution. We've got our answer. We've got negative 1 is less than or equal to x. And now we got to graph it. So now we're going to take that answer, and we're going to put it on a number line. So, again, we set up that nice, neat number line. We put 0 in the middle. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We go negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. And we circle that important negative 1 number. Every time, same setup. Now we got to test some points and see which one works. So I'm going to pick randomly. I'm going to pick 5 and negative 4. You can pick anything you want. But we're going to see which one works. So, testing the points, is negative 1 less than or equal to negative 4? And is negative 1 less than or equal to 5? So negative 1 is not less than negative 4, but it is less than 5. So I can see which one passes and fails. So take your pencil and start shading off to the right-hand side and make a big arrow. And then test the point. Is negative 1 actually less than or equal to negative 1? It's not less than, but it definitely is equal to, and we have an equal sign, so fill it in, make it a nice solid hole. It's not an empty hole on the number line, it's solid. Okay, so do you know who this person is? Because we're going to talk about him. We're going to do a little problem that involves talking about NASA in flight. So if you're interested in being a NASA pilot, there's actually quite a process to it. To become a pilot, you have to first learn how to fly jets before you can fly on a rocket to outer space. There's a process. And it's pretty interesting what they have to go through to train and get ready to fly to outer space. You've probably seen some movies about it or maybe some videos online where they have to do all these things where they have to get used to the gravity change, and they put them in these contraptions that spin them around really, really fast, and it just sounds like it would be really hard to learn how to do. But, oh, and here's someone interesting, first female pilot. So we're going to do a little question about being a pilot. If you want to fly to outer space, there are some requirements. Unfortunately, not everybody's body is designed to fly to outer space. When NASA picks their pilots, they have some criteria, and a lot of it has to do with, what you studied and what your degree is in and what your capability of flying, what your skills in flying are. But some of it has to do with your physical abilities also. Like if you have poor eyesight, you're probably not going to be chosen to be a pilot, unfortunately. I'm sorry, I'm one of those people. I wear contacts, so I'm kind of ruled out. But here's what you need to know. If you want to become an astronaut pilot, first you have to get a bachelor's degree, which means you have to go to college and get your typical 4-year degree. You can get that in a whole lot of different things. Engineering, science, different types of sciences like biological and physical science, or even math, which is the degree I have. So you could totally study mathematics and be on your way to being an astronaut pilot. But that's just step one. Then you have to log in over 1,000 hours or more of pilot time. You have to fly jets. You have to be practicing. So you have to log in your hours and really get in your work. A lot of astronauts do that by being part of the Army and enrolling in that, but that's not the only way to do it, to be in the Navy or the Army or something like that, but that is one way. And then you also have to pass a space physical exam. So this actually means you have to be in a decent amount of shape. Like you can't be completely out of shape and fly to outer space. And that physical exam is kind of interesting because it also involves what's your height, what's your eyesight, what's your blood pressure. Because like I said earlier, if you have poor eyesight, they're probably not going to pick you to be a pilot. Also, if you're super tall, I happen to be a pretty tall person. Think about the size, like when they engineer and design those rockets that go to outer space, they don't there's not a lot of space inside. They're pretty small. So if you're a super tall person and you're one of those, could be a basketball player type people, it's hard to cram your big body into that little bit of space. So they do have some height requirements. Like you can't be too tall to get inside those things. And blood pressure factors in too, which is unfortunate for some people because things can run in your family where you might have really high blood pressure and it's out of your control. Okay, so why am I telling you all this? Why is this happening in this video? Well, the next problem has to do with becoming an astronaut pilot. So that was a little background knowledge for you. Here is our story. A person can be no taller than 6.25 feet to become an astronaut pilot for NASA. This is one of their requirements. And your friend is 5 feet 9 inches tall. Write and solve an inequality that represents how much your friend can grow and still meet the requirements. Because your friend's in middle school. They're not done growing. So we need to figure out how much more can your friend grow before they get too tall and cannot be a pilot for NASA. Now we probably could answer this without getting too detailed into our algebra, but because we're in algebra and we're trying to practice, we're going to make this problem kind of get a little extreme with our thinking. So first, let's write down the facts. That's kind of a big story problem. So here are the important facts. What do we need out of this story? Well, the current height of your friend. How tall is your friend right now today? 5 feet 9 inches. That's how tall I am. The second fact is you can be no taller than. That seems like a really important thing to write down. It sounds like an inequality to me. It sounds like no taller than or no more than. You could be no taller than, it sounds like a less than symbol, 6.25 feet. So that's kind of the cutoff. So you have to be less than or equal to 6.25 feet. Now we got to define some variables. If we're doing algebra, we need variables, an x or a y, and we got to define those ourselves. We have to come up with what those are. So I think since we're dealing with this height, I think we have a little bit of a problem that we better kind of clean up first. We've got inches and we've got feet, and that's kind of a clash. So I'm going to convert that 5 feet 9 inches into a decimal, and that's just 5.75 feet. If you're wondering how I did that, I know 9 inches, I know 12 inches makes a foot, so 9 out of 12, if I do 9 divided by 12, I get 0.75, and that helps me convert this to 5.75 feet. I feel like that's going to help us as we go down the road here. Okay, back to defining our variable. I kind of sidetracked with that. So let's use h as our variable, and I'm picking h because it's going to be the possible height that our friend can grow. That's what we're trying to figure out. The question was, how much height can our friend grow? So h stands for height. And I'm writing this a certain way. I'm writing it as a let statement. Let h equal the possible height a friend can grow. Okay, so we've got our variable, we got our facts, we got our variable. Time for our inequality, our equation, and we need to solve it. So here's what I know. Current height is 5 feet 9 inches, or 5.75, and they can't get taller than 6.25. So we're going to take their current height, 5.75, plus what they can grow, and it has to be less than or equal to 6.25. There's our inequality. 5.75 plus h is less than or equal to 6.25. Okay, your turn. I'm going to have you stop the video, and I want you to solve and graph for h, please. So pause the video right now and see if you can finish this problem out. Okay, you're unpausing the video, and now we're ready to check. So you've got a line down the middle. Hopefully you took the 5.75 and you subtracted it from both sides. Then you get h isolated by itself, and you get 0.5. 6.25 minus 5.75 is 0.5. So the height that they can grow has to be less than or equal to 0.5. What does that mean in our story? That means your friend cannot grow more than 0.5 feet, or 6 inches if you think about it, to become a pilot. So your friend can't grow more than 6 inches, or else they're out of the program already. That's our solution. Okay guys, so the big takeaway in this video was to know that you can solve an inequality just like you can an equation. Line down the middle, isolate the variable, graph it on a number line. And I hope you kind of got a handle of how to do that. So there'll be more on this. There's going to be more follow-up videos. Thanks for watching. I hope you took nice notes. See you later.